1 month after she moved in, I noticed the smoke alarm kept flashing red. She said it was nothing. I took it down. Inside was a tiny mic, connected to her old tablet. I didn't ask why. I just replaced it with one of my own, and let it record what she said when she thought I'd left again. The smoke alarm had been flashing red for 3 weeks straight, creating an ominous rhythm that seemed to pulse in sync with my growing unease about Lauren's behavior. Every morning, I would wake to that crimson beacon blinking above our bedroom doorway. And every morning Lauren would have another perfectly reasonable explanation ready before I even asked. The battery was dying. She would insist while sipping her coffee, or the sensor had accumulated dust from the construction work happening 2 blocks away. Sometimes she claimed it was a quirk of these older apartment models, something she had researched extensively after noticing my concern. Her explanations were so detailed and confident that I almost convinced myself she was right, except for one nagging detail that kept me awake at night. I had installed smoke alarms in 3 previous apartments over the past decade, and not once had I encountered a functioning unit that flashed red continuously. Green meant operational, yellow indicated maintenance needed, and red typically signaled an actual emergency or complete malfunction requiring immediate replacement. The 37 days since Lauren moved in had transformed our relationship in ways I was only beginning to understand. What started as natural cohabitation adjustments had evolved into something that felt more like careful choreography. Lauren would position herself with mathematical precision during our conversations, always angling her body so that her voice projected toward the ceiling while her back remained turned to the blinking device above our door. Her speaking volume had increased noticeably, particularly when we discussed anything personal or financial in the bedroom. Her phone habits had become increasingly secretive as well. Calls that she previously took casually in my presence now required private sessions behind locked bathroom doors or lengthy walks around the neighborhood block. When I asked about work colleagues or family members who might have called, she would deflect with questions about my own social connections, turning every inquiry into an interview about my background, my finances, my daily routines, and my long-term plans. The evening I decided to investigate the smoke alarm, Lauren had sent a text explaining that she would be working an overnight shift due to an emergency surgery at the hospital. This provided the perfect opportunity to examine the device without her watchful supervision. I retrieved my stepladder from the utility closet and positioned it carefully beneath the blinking unit, expecting to find standard detection components and perhaps a corroded battery connection that needed cleaning. The moment I unscrewed the plastic casing and peered inside, my world shifted fundamentally. Nestled among the legitimate smoke detection circuitry was a small cylindrical microphone, professionally installed and connected to a miniature transmitter that I recognized as similar to the Bluetooth adapters Lauren used with her tablet computer. The red light that had been bothering me for weeks was actually a recording indicator, showing that our private conversations were being actively monitored and potentially stored or transmitted elsewhere. My hands trembled as I examined the modification more closely. The installation showed considerable technical skill, with the microphone positioned for optimal audio capture while the transmitter was configured to operate on frequencies that would not interfere with the smoke detection functions. Someone had invested significant time and effort into creating this surveillance system, and the obvious suspect was the woman who had insisted the flashing light was perfectly normal. The implications cascaded through my mind like dominoes falling in sequence. Every intimate conversation we had shared in the bedroom, every private phone call I had made while Lauren was supposedly at work, every vulnerable moment when I had discussed my fears, hopes, and financial concerns had been captured and potentially transmitted to unknown recipients. The violation felt both deeply personal and professionally calculated, suggesting motives far more serious than simple relationship paranoia. Rather than confronting Lauren immediately or destroying the evidence in anger, I found myself developing a more strategic response. If she was monitoring my activities and conversations, then I needed to understand the scope and purpose of her surveillance before taking any action that might alert her to my discovery. The situation demanded careful planning and counterintelligence rather than emotional confrontation. I photographed the modified smoke alarm from multiple angles, documenting the microphone placement, transmitter connections, and any serial numbers or identifying marks that might prove useful later. Then I carefully reassembled the device exactly as I had found it, ensuring that Lauren would never suspect her surveillance system had been discovered and examined. My first stop the following morning was an electronics store downtown, where I purchased an identical smoke alarm along with sophisticated recording equipment that far exceeded the amateur setup I had discovered. The sales clerk, assuming I was working on a home security project, recommended additional components, including a digital storage device capable of capturing weeks of audio data and a transmitter that could send encrypted signals directly to my smartphone. The installation process required 3 complete attempts before I achieved the precise balance of functionality and concealment that would allow my counter-surveillance system to operate undetected. I had to carefully hollow out sections of the new smoke alarm casing to accommodate my recording equipment while ensuring that the device would still function as intended if a real fire emergency occurred. My equipment was significantly more advanced than Lauren's crude modification. The microphone could capture conversations from across the entire bedroom with clarity that rivaled professional recording studios, while the digital processor could filter out background noise and enhance human speech patterns. The encrypted transmission system would send real-time audio feeds to a secure application on my phone while simultaneously storing everything on an internal memory chip that could preserve months of recordings. The most challenging aspect was replicating the exact flashing pattern that had characterized Lauren's surveillance device. I spent hours programming the LED indicator to maintain the same rhythm and intensity, ensuring that she would never suspect that her surveillance system had been replaced with my own more sophisticated version. The red light continued its ominous blinking, but now it was serving my purposes rather than hers. I stored Lauren's original modified smoke alarm in a sealed container in my closet, wrapped in anti-static material and accompanied by detailed photographs and documentation. This evidence would prove invaluable if I ever needed to demonstrate that I had been under surveillance, though I hoped the situation would never escalate to require such drastic measures. The waiting period tested my acting abilities and emotional control to their absolute limits. I had to maintain completely normal behavior around Lauren while knowing that she had been violating my privacy for weeks or possibly months. Every conversation felt like a performance where I had to project normalcy while analyzing her responses for signs of deception or manipulation. Lauren continued her established patterns without any indication that she suspected my discovery. She still positioned herself strategically during conversations, spoke louder than necessary in the bedroom, and took private phone calls in locations that she believed were beyond the range of her listening device. Her confidence in her surveillance system made her careless in other areas, and I began noticing additional details about her behavior that had previously seemed innocuous. She had developed an unusual interest in my work schedule, asking detailed questions about meetings, travel plans, and overtime requirements that seemed excessive even for a concerned partner. Her inquiries about my financial situation had become more frequent and specific, touching on topics like insurance policies, investment accounts, and family inheritance that felt more like intelligence gathering than normal relationship discussions. 3 days after installing my counter-surveillance equipment, Lauren came home from work in a state of visible agitation that contrasted sharply with her usual composed demeanor. She paced around the apartment restlessly, checking her phone constantly and making several hushed calls from the bathroom. Her eyes kept returning to the smoke alarm with an intensity that suggested she was calculating something important. That evening, I announced my intention to visit my brother across town, explaining that I would likely stay overnight to help him with some home renovation projects that required an early morning start. Lauren's relief was immediate and poorly concealed despite her attempts to express disappointment about my absence. She kissed me goodbye at the door with unusual enthusiasm and reminded me repeatedly to drive safely, as if my departure was more important to her than my eventual return. I drove around the neighborhood several times before parking 3 blocks away and walking back to our building through the service alley that provided access to the rear fire escape. From my concealed position outside our bedroom window, I had an unobstructed view of the smoke alarm and could monitor my smartphone for incoming audio transmissions from my hidden recording system. Lauren's first phone call began exactly 19 minutes after my departure, and the voice that emerged from my hidden microphone was completely foreign to me. Gone was the warm, caring tone I had known for months, replaced by cold professionalism that suggested extensive training in deception and manipulation. She was reporting to someone about my daily patterns, work commitments, financial resources, and personal vulnerabilities with the detached efficiency of an intelligence operative filing a mission report. The conversation revealed that Lauren was not working alone or pursuing her own agenda, but was instead part of a sophisticated criminal organization that specialized in targeting financially stable men in specific demographic categories. She had been assigned to develop a romantic relationship with me based on a psychological profile that predicted my responses to particular manipulation techniques and emotional triggers. Her infiltration of my life had been planned months before we actually met, with the seemingly accidental encounter at the coffee shop near my office being the result of careful surveillance and timing. The criminal organization had researched my background extensively, identifying my relationship patterns, financial vulnerabilities, and psychological weaknesses before selecting Lauren as the most suitable operative for the assignment. The scope of intelligence gathering was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Lauren had compiled detailed reports about my work colleagues, family relationships, social connections, daily routines, and financial habits that could only have been obtained through weeks of systematic observation and electronic surveillance. She knew my bank account balances, credit card spending patterns, investment portfolio details, and insurance policy information with accuracy that exceeded what I could have provided from memory. But the most shocking revelation emerged during her second phone call, when she began coordinating with multiple handlers about advancing to the next phase of the operation. Lauren was simultaneously running identical operations against 4 other men in different cities, using variations of the same identity and emotional manipulation playbook that had proven successful in previous campaigns. Each target had been selected based on similar criteria, including income level, relationship status, family background, and psychological vulnerabilities that made them susceptible to romantic manipulation. Lauren would travel between cities on rotating schedules, maintaining parallel relationships while her accomplices monitored the targets during her absences and provided intelligence updates about any suspicious behavior or changing circumstances. The criminal organization operated with military precision and corporate efficiency. They maintained detailed databases of successful approaches, target responses, and operational outcomes that allowed them to refine their techniques and maximize their success rates. Lauren was just one of dozens of operatives working different territories across multiple states, all coordinating their activities through encrypted communication systems and shared intelligence platforms. During her third call, I learned that my situation had become problematic for the organization. Lauren reported that I had been asking too many questions about her background and showing increased suspicion about the smoke alarm surveillance. Her handlers were pressuring her to accelerate the timeline and move immediately into the financial exploitation phase before I could uncover their operation. The acceleration meant convincing me to make significant changes to my insurance policies and financial accounts within the next 2 weeks. Lauren needed to become the primary beneficiary on my life insurance, while also gaining access to joint accounts and credit facilities that she could control independently. The organization had specific quotas and deadlines that required rapid progress regardless of the increased risks. The most chilling moment came when Lauren began discussing contingency plans for targets who became too suspicious or uncooperative. She spoke casually about methods for destroying reputations through false allegations, creating legal complications that would drain financial resources, and arranging circumstances that could result in serious accidents or health emergencies. These were not theoretical discussions, but detailed operational procedures that had been implemented successfully in previous cases. The organization maintained relationships with corrupt professionals in law enforcement, healthcare, and legal services who could be activated to support these contingency plans when necessary. Lauren mentioned specific examples of targets who had suffered mysterious accidents or sudden health crises after becoming problematic, describing these outcomes as routine business expenses rather than serious crimes. Her final call of the evening included coordination with accomplices who would pose as insurance agents and financial advisors during the accelerated exploitation phase. These individuals had sophisticated false credentials and professional references that could withstand casual scrutiny, allowing them to facilitate fraudulent transactions while maintaining plausible legitimacy. Instead of confronting Lauren or immediately contacting law enforcement, I realized that my unique position as an aware target provided an unprecedented opportunity to document the entire criminal operation and gather evidence that could destroy their network completely. I decided to play the role of an increasingly cooperative victim while secretly recording every interaction and building an ironclad legal case. The next morning, I greeted Lauren with unusual enthusiasm about our relationship and expressed eagerness to begin making concrete plans for our future together. I mentioned my desire to update my financial planning to properly include her in my life, suggesting that we should meet with professionals to discuss insurance policies, joint accounts, and other arrangements that would protect us both. Lauren's excitement was barely contained despite her attempts to appear nonchalant about financial discussions. She immediately offered to help organize my documents and suggested that we contact her friend who worked in insurance to discuss policy updates that would benefit both of us. Her eagerness to accelerate the timeline aligned perfectly with the pressure I had heard described during her phone calls. I began carrying a small digital recorder during all interactions with Lauren, while my smoke alarm surveillance system continued capturing everything that occurred in our apartment. The combination provided comprehensive documentation of her manipulation techniques and criminal activities that would be admissible in court proceedings. The insurance meeting was scheduled for the following week at an office downtown that appeared legitimate, but had subtle details that suggested careful staging. Lauren's supposed friend was actually a sophisticated criminal operative who had constructed an elaborate false identity, complete with professional credentials, office space, and administrative support that could fool casual investigation. During the meeting, I was pressured to significantly increase my life insurance coverage while designating Lauren as the primary beneficiary for the entire amount. The fake insurance agent used advanced psychological manipulation techniques, alternating between creating artificial urgency and offering false reassurance to overcome any hesitation or logical objections. The policy amounts being proposed were far beyond what any legitimate insurance company would approve for someone in my situation, but the fake agent explained that his company specialized in high-value policies for professionals with unique circumstances. The application process would be expedited through special procedures that bypassed normal underwriting requirements, allowing the policy to become active within days rather than weeks. I signed the preliminary paperwork while my hidden recorder captured every word of the conversation, including casual comments between Lauren and the fake agent that revealed the fraudulent nature of the entire transaction. They discussed commission structures, payout schedules, and operational procedures that would never exist in legitimate insurance business. The loan application process was even more revealing about the scope of their criminal enterprise. Lauren suggested that we apply for a substantial business loan to start a consulting firm together, with both of us having equal access to the borrowed funds, but with her handling all day-to-day financial management responsibilities. The loan officer was clearly another criminal accomplice who had access to genuine bank facilities and legitimate loan processing systems. The approval moved forward despite obvious red flags that should have triggered additional scrutiny, including inconsistencies in Lauren's employment history and financial background that any competent underwriter would have identified immediately. Meanwhile, I had retained an attorney who specialized in complex fraud cases and was building a comprehensive evidence file that included audio recordings, photographs of surveillance equipment, documentation of false identities, and detailed timelines of the criminal activities. My lawyer explained that I was dealing with a sophisticated racketeering organization that had likely victimized hundreds of people using similar methods across multiple jurisdictions. The private investigator we hired uncovered Lauren's real identity within 2 weeks of beginning his research. Her actual name was completely different from what she had told me, and her background included extensive criminal history involving identity theft, fraud, extortion, and association with organized crime networks that operated internationally. The woman I thought I loved was entirely fictional, constructed specifically to exploit my psychological profile and financial vulnerabilities based on detailed intelligence gathering that had begun months before our first meeting. Every personality trait, shared interest, and emotional connection had been carefully calculated to maximize my susceptibility to her manipulation. The breakthrough came when my private investigator identified the organization's communication hub and began monitoring their encrypted messages. We discovered that Lauren was simultaneously running operations against 7 other men across 4 states, using different identities and backstories that were tailored to each target's specific psychological profile and financial situation. The evidence file grew to include intercepted communications between dozens of operatives, financial records showing money laundering through multiple shell companies, and documentation of corruption involving professionals in various industries who provided services to support the criminal activities. Federal investigators became involved when my attorney presented the evidence to a prosecutor who specialized in organized crime and racketeering cases. The scope of the criminal enterprise exceeded anything that could be handled at the state level, and the interstate nature of their operations brought it under federal jurisdiction with access to much more powerful investigative resources. The federal raid on our apartment 6 weeks later resembled something from a military operation, with agents from multiple agencies executing simultaneous warrants across 8 states to arrest operatives and seize evidence from the criminal organization. Lauren was arrested while attempting to flee through our bathroom window, carrying a bag containing multiple false identities and communication devices that linked her to operatives across the country. The evidence I had gathered through my counter-surveillance operation became the foundation of the prosecution's case against the entire network. My recordings provided real-time documentation of their operational methods, target selection criteria, manipulation techniques, and criminal procedures that would have been impossible to obtain through traditional law enforcement investigation. The criminal organization had victimized more than 200 people over a 5-year period, with total financial damages exceeding $8 million. Their operations extended across 12 states and involved corruption of professionals in banking, insurance, healthcare, and legal services who had facilitated fraudulent transactions and covered up criminal activities. Lauren received a sentence of 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges including racketeering, conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Her cooperation with prosecutors led to additional arrests and convictions throughout the network, but she maintained that many of the organization's leaders had escaped detection and continued operating under different identities. The legal proceedings consumed more than 3 years of my life, requiring testimony in multiple trials and depositions that forced me to relive the psychological manipulation and betrayal repeatedly. The financial recovery process was complicated by the sophisticated money laundering systems the organization had used, making it difficult to trace stolen assets through multiple shell companies and offshore accounts. The psychological impact extended far beyond the immediate legal and financial consequences. I found myself unable to trust romantic relationships, analyzing every interaction for signs of deception or manipulation. Simple activities like dating or meeting new people became exercises in paranoia and suspicion that made normal social connections nearly impossible. The violation of privacy through the surveillance equipment felt more personally devastating than the attempted financial crimes. Knowing that my most intimate moments and private thoughts had been recorded, analyzed, and shared among criminal operatives created a sense of exposure and vulnerability that persisted long after the legal cases were resolved. Professional counseling helped me understand that I had been targeted by sophisticated criminals who specialized in psychological manipulation, and that my susceptibility to their techniques did not reflect personal weakness or failure. The organization had invested considerable resources in studying human psychology and developing manipulation methods that could overcome the natural skepticism and defensive instincts of most targets. The smoke alarm incident taught me that the most dangerous threats in our modern world often disguise themselves as mundane household items or trusted relationships. The people who seem closest to us and most deserving of our confidence may be the very ones who pose the greatest risks to our security, finances, and emotional well-being. The investigation revealed that similar criminal organizations continue to operate using updated methods and emerging technologies that make detection increasingly difficult. Social media platforms, dating applications, and digital communication systems provide unprecedented opportunities for intelligence gathering and target identification that exceed anything available to previous generations of criminals. Trust, I learned through painful experience, is not something to be given freely based on emotional attraction or surface compatibility, but something to be earned through consistent behavior and verified through independent investigation. The modern world requires constant vigilance and healthy skepticism, even in our most intimate relationships, because the consequences of misplaced trust can be catastrophic and irreversible. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.